so I'll just point at Kelly. Okay, so this presentation is not necessarily about MD Anderson, but I wouldn't do justice if I didn't talk about MD Anderson. So we all know it's an amazing place dedicated to cancer treatment, research, education, prevention, and survivorship. Slide. And so quick facts on MD Anderson: 127,000 patients annually, 20,000 employees, 1,700 faculty, very large footprint. Here's something interesting. The gross revenue of MD Anderson represents, or the impact of MD Anderson, not just the gross revenue, but the economic impact of MD Anderson on the Houston economy is equivalent to 2%. That's quite a big slice of pie there. Okay, so if you're not familiar with MD Anderson, this is what we're looking at. It's in the Texas Medical Center. It's a very hyper-urban environment. There's not a lot of green space there. So you see downtown Houston to the north. What you don't see is that there's another slide here, another slide here, and another slide down below. It's all Texas Medical Center. It's a very busy place. Slide. But when you get between the trees, you start to see places like this, these greenways, these corridors of green space. And when you get even closer, you start to see places like this. This is a patient care garden. As you'll soon learn, I talk a lot about the restorative value of these gardens. Slide. You also see a lot of places like this. This is going to be the focus of much of our conversation today. This is a prairie restoration site. So a little bit about myself real quick. I am, my current role is the Director of Operations right here at this very facility. In a strange twist of fate, a few weeks ago, I never imagined myself being in this position. I actually left MD Anderson. But I was a facilities project manager there for about 7 years. And my background is in horticulture. I went to Texas A&M. And I define myself as a recovering landscaper because I was a landscape company owner for about 15 years before I decided to spread my wings. And I say I'm recovering because when I was a landscaper, I was not water smart. I was not sustainable. I was not ecologically aware. I didn't have these core competencies that I have now, working with nature instead of against it. So, next slide. So, topics for today. Why plant pocket prairies? This is very important. It's very important to understand the background, why we do the things we do at MD Anderson. And you will learn that the value proposition that represents also applies to places like Herman Park, or the places that you guys work and do your conservation work at. I'm going to talk about the establishment, benefits, and challenges of our pocket prairie, and those are all kind of blurred together. And so if you have any specific questions about that as we go, feel free to ask. Okay? Then I'm going to talk about the evolution of prairies. So as you will find out, this pocket prairie that most of you guys are familiar with, was the beginning of a series of events that unfolded and led to bigger and better projects that increased the sustainable footprint of MD Anderson. Slide. Okay, so first of all, in order to help you understand the why behind why we have pocket prairies, I want to talk about the role of nature in hospital settings. Slide. So you recall that I was a landscaper, right? So when I sold projects to my clients in the past, I sold prestige and increased property values, and it was a pretty hollow value proposition there. When I came to MD Anderson and started to talk to people about what I was doing there, I was often met with tears and hugs and thank yous. And it really caught me off guard at first, but what I soon realized was that gardens at MD Anderson and hospital settings in general elicit very powerful emotional responses from people. So I wanted to learn more. So I uncovered this gentleman, Dr. Roger S. Ulrich. He's a pioneer of what we call evidence-based design. He specialized in healthcare, and he looks primarily at how healthcare systems are designed and how they integrate with the environment. Okay, slide. So you may not be familiar with Dr. Ulrich, but I'm sure everyone in here has heard at least one reference to this groundbreaking study from 1984. He was the first to document the post-operative recovery of hospital patients who underwent the exact same procedure, the gallbladder removal procedure. Same doctors, same nurses, same everything. Even the rooms were laid out the same. The only thing that was different was the view that these patients had from the room. One view was of brick walls, the other view was of deciduous trees. So all things being equal, how do you think that their recovery differed from each other? It's like, well, in the interest of time, I'll tell you. Here's where I'm going with this. The group that had the view of nature experienced shorter recovery periods, they required less pain medication, they had more positive attitudes, they had fewer complications, and they had less stress and anxiety. They also had higher patient satisfaction with the healthcare providers. Slide. This, by the way, less stress and anxiety is the #1 benefit of nature in hospital settings. But that's also the #1 benefit that we get simply from looking at green space. So if I was to open these windows again, within minutes, we would experience a lot of these effects here. But the fascinating thing to me is that it's completely involuntary. Your body can't help it. Okay. I think we skipped it. Okay. So it turns out that there are a lot more benefits besides improved clinical outcomes. We have physical benefits. We have physiological benefits. We have mental health and wellness benefits simply from interacting with nature. Slide. So we understood this so well at MD Anderson that we created several programs that we call nature-based interventions that we used as a tool to improve quality of life for patients, visitors, staff, and the general public. So here you see an example. Slide. We had a garden program which spun off into lots of outreach. We had cooking classes revolving around that. Slide. Have you ever heard of doctors prescribing nature to patients? We had a similar program like that. Slide. Okay. We had a neat program that was Prairie-based with partners at Katy Prairie Conservancy and the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, reaching out to our pediatric groups. So they have started a program called Virtually Wild that is still going on, and they stream live content, live nature-based content into our Children's Cancer Hospital once a month, and they rotate from our national wildlife preserves and prairies around the Houston area. It's really neat. Slide. Okay. And we have a legacy volunteer rose program where roses are pruned and delivered to patients in the hospital bed. So nature is very well integrated into the fabric of MD Anderson. Slide. Okay, so because of this, because of these benefits that we've been talking about and what I just shared with these programs, I believe what Dr. Ulrich says, that nature is an undeniable part of our public health infrastructure. And that's the same way that I view places like Herman Park. Slide. So the other part of the why, which is very important, we're kind of setting the stage for the prairies here, is that our health and environmental health are inextricably linked. They are connected. Slide. So one of the benefits of working at MD Anderson is that you get first-hand exposure to the research, and you not only that, you get to meet the people doing the research. So one of the things that I did was learn about the link between chronic exposure to chemicals in our environment with the occurrence of diseases like cancer. Slide. So one of the things that I learned about also was that common lawn and garden chemicals that we might use outside of Herman Park or on the grounds at MD Anderson or to maintain a pocket prairie are in fact powerful endocrine disruptors, many of which are linked to types of cancer. So here you have from the Environmental Working Group, Dirty Dozen endocrine disruptor list. #2 is atrazine. Do you know what that is? You know what that is? It's a herbicide, but do you know what that is sold as at Home Depot or Lowe's? It's weed and feed fertilizer. So it's nasty stuff. Organophosphate pesticides, powerful endocrine disruptors. Infamously, Nazi Germany also used organophosphate class chemicals. They called it nerve gas. It's the same mode of action. Slide. How many of you guys have seen streets like this? I live on one. Slide. So I had this epiphany going from an unsustainable landscape practice to MD Anderson that the average American lawn is actually one of the most toxic environments you can set foot in because of the overuse of chemical pesticides, fertilizers, fungicides. So that little dog there is sitting in that perfect green grass, but he's probably absorbing all of those chemicals into his bloodstream. So are your kids when they're walking, or your grandkids when they're walking barefoot out there. So I had this epiphany, almost with horror, that I would never have a picnic in my own lawn. It It was not a safe environment. Slide. Does it rain here in Houston? Does it? Yes. You know, have we seen a lot of rain lately? Does it flood? Yes. Do we over-irrigate? So when that happens, all of those chemicals in our landscapes run off into our watersheds. These red lines are contaminated waterways in Harris County, and as you can see, most of them are contaminated. They are unsafe for contact, recreation, or fish consumption. And the number one contaminant in our waterways is E. coli bacteria. It comes from dog feces. This is a hyper-urban county. People have dogs. There's probably more dogs than people. And they walk. Where do you walk your dog in a neighborhood? You walk your dogs on the bayous and the detention pond areas, the green space, right? So all of that ends up back in our watershed. Slide. But what else is in there? It's these guys again. So not only are these powerful endocrine disruptors that impact our own health, they are ecological disruptors. Atrazine causes sexual dimorphism in amphibians. They develop both sex hormones, or both sex organs. In fact, I just read an article about that recently. Organophosphate pesticides linked to the plight of native bees and our imported honeybees. Okay. Like, so what is the point? Why did I share all that? Conventional land management practices are damaging not only to our own health, but ecological and environmental health too. So again, we're kind of setting a stage for why we want to restore natural ecosystems such as Prairie. Slide. So this is our why in a nutshell. We want our landscapes, whether it's here, there, your place, we want them to promote human health and wellness, all those benefits that we looked at. We want them to promote environmental health. They should serve that dual purpose. And there oftentimes can be economic benefit to it. As we'll discuss in a little bit, our prairies have an immediate return on investment by avoiding the cost of mowing that equivalent area of grass 40 times a year. Slide. So this, by the way, is the model for sustainability. You may have heard this pronounced as people planet profit. You know, there's a number of ways to repeat this, but the message is that this has been the driving force behind the decisions that we've made with land management, and our prairies are sustainable. Prairies represent all of this. Okay, so let's talk about the establishment, benefits, and challenges of prairies. Slide. Okay. In order to do that, I want to step back just a little bit. When we started restoring prairies at MD Anderson, I knew nothing about prairies. I thought they were just flat pieces of grassland, essentially. Low in biodiversity and low in life, and boy was I wrong. So in order to really understand what a prairie was, we had to look back in time. And this is a picture from 1874 in Galveston, Texas. That's Galveston, Iowa. What do you see is the ranchers on a prairie. So, you know, if you're not from Texas, that's okay, but you need to know that prairies provided a seemingly infinite rangeland to be grazed for, or forage for livestock, to the point that a lot of species were almost grazed to extinction, like yellow Indian grass. It was easy to build on a prairie. 3/4 of Houston, if not more, is in the Gulf Coast prairie ecosystem. Something that I learned is that the Gulf Coast prairie actually extended all the way up to just below Tomball, where present-day Tomball is at now. If you go back to 1943 and look at some of the aerial photography, I have to be careful not to call it satellite photography because we didn't have satellites back then. The aerial photography, you will see the telltale signs of prairie topography still in the Tomball area. Slide. This is what I'm talking about. This is the topography that you guys, as native plant experts, are very familiar with now. You should be. But this is what a prairie looked like. This is a prairie remnant. So those dark patches are depressions, low areas called potholes. Okay. The lighter areas are upland areas. And you can see those little white stipple patterns. Those are called Nema mounds. Those are basically micro sand dunes. I won't get into the geology of it much. It's actually quite fascinating if you care to learn about it more. But basically, this is the result of eons of meandering streams across the prairie landscapes. Okay? But what I learned was that prairie is not completely flat. There is that topography, and that each lowland area and each upland area supports its own unique community of plants and animals. Slide. That's the same area today. Okay? Now look to the right side of the screen and advance the slide. You'll see that spot right there. Raise your hand if you know what that is. Those people in here, right? So what is it? It's the Deer Park Prairie. Right? So we went there. I wanted to know what a prairie really was. The Deer Park Prairie, if you're not familiar with it, is a remnant prairie site. It's 64 acres, I believe. Less than 1%, I think even less than 1/2 of 1% of the original Gulf Coast ecosystem remains intact today. So this is one of them. Do you guys know who found that? Do you know who discovered that land? Don Verser, okay. So, great eye. So this land has never been plowed. It has been grazed on, but it's never been cultivated and never been built on. So you have that, you have the ancient seed bank there, the ancient soil structure, it's all there. So we went to take a look at what a prairie remnant was first slide. And here you go. So I'm a horticulture guy owning a landscape company, and I know it all, right? But I'm walking up to this prairie 100 yards away. Immediately, I recognize that it's a special place. There's plants that I've never seen before in my entire life. Slide. And this is what I saw: a forest of liatris. These were almost as tall as me, and going through there, kind of sandy soils. There were orchids growing on the ground, and all sorts of really neat plants. It was amazing. And to me, it looks intentionally planted. That was something else that I thought was really neat. Slide. Here you go. So these big cone flowers, as big as my hand, which is a very surreal experience for me. So when I saw all this, this was the game changer. This is when I knew that we were going to make our pocket prairie. We were going to pull out all the stops and do what we could to make our pocket prairie a success. Slide. There it is. This is the beginning of it. This is 2012, I believe. This is the site of the former HMB building. It was imploded where that oval track is. This prairie patch down here is where the parking lot is at. How many of you guys have been out here before? Not everybody, so some of you guys. So it's accessible. Well, it's open to the public. It's a public space. It's hard to get to because there's just no parking around. You could go to one of the TMC parking garages and walk down here. But this is shortly. This is probably a few months after beginning the installation process. It was intentionally designed, so we thought that if we were going to have a tall prairie, we needed to make it blend and fit the site. So having an intentional design is part of the process. So what do I mean by that? We've got a very deliberate turf setback. That's a 20-foot strip. We have a border that defines it, and then we have the wild prairie in the middle. And that was important in order for us to make it look like it belonged versus something that was neglected. Okay? Now you can't do that everywhere. If you're gonna restore a 5,000 acre prairie like Jim Willis with Wildlife Habitat Federation, you don't worry about that stuff. But if it's a pocket prairie in an urban or suburban site, and it's a demonstration site that you're using to try to sell the benefits of the prairie, pull out some extra funding and create it intentionally. Hire a landscape architect or a designer to help.
How is that border created?
That is mulch. It's just 2 feet by 6 inches mounded mulch.
That's ineffective in keeping the setback grass. I guess that's San Augustine.
So this is zoysia grass.
Zoysia.
So you guys will not like this answer here, but the purpose of the mulch is to use herbicide because whatever turf grass you use is going to invade, and it does, and vice versa. The prairie will come out into the turf grass. So mulch is a buffer to use a herbicide on, so that the herbicide will stay in that, in theory, stay in that mulch strip. But it's also an aesthetic border as well.
And herbicide, what herbicide? Glyphosate?
Glyphosate, yes. We have also used agricultural grade vinegar.
What percentage is that?
I don't recall offhand. You can get it from, I think, San Jacinto Environmental Supply and through Mike Saran or John Ferguson. Those guys would have the resources for the vinegar.
Yep.
Slide. Okay, so at this stage in the game, the Deer Park Prairie was not saved. We saw the need to go there and harvest seeds so that we could preserve those ecotypes and propagate them on our prairie and spread them elsewhere. If you guys need seeds, you come out to the Anderson Prairie and collect seeds. So, so there is a combination of wild collected seeds. There's a coastal prairie mix as well that was purchased, and we also purchased individual species. There is a handout, you guys pick it up before you leave. It's on the table, so you have it. That is the original plant list. So one of the things that I learned about that, which I will hold my thought there for a second, but go on to the next slide. So here's the plant list I'm talking about. I know you can't read it up here on the screen, but you have it in your hands. One of the things that I thought was interesting was that there are more forb species than grass species, and that's how it was. That was my observation also when I went out to the Deer Park Prairie. Again, remember, I thought prairie was this completely flat, ubiquitous sea of grass. Okay, slide. So there you go, 28 species of grass, 38 forbs. Slide. So this is the first winter. You see a lot of, we did our initial broadcast seeding in the fall. We also used a cultipacker to press the seeds into the soil. So this was a prepared site, fresh soil. That's a stretch. I can't hardly call it soil. Fresh dirt was brought in. It was like beat horizon soil. There was no organic matter in it. It was laid out over the site. We broadcast the seed by hand. We used the cultipacker to pack it in. It's just looks like an aerator kind of that you tow behind a utility vehicle to get that soil seed contact. And a lot of grasses were actually sprigged by hand. Grasses like the eastern gamma grass, which likes to live around some of the low-lying areas. Then we actually sprig those in the subtle depressions that we have out here. Now, remember, keep in mind that this used to be a parking lot. Next, and then we have these tall ones are the prairie basket flowers, really tall. They're like 6 to 8 feet tall sometimes. Okay, slide. And this was, so that last slide was late summer. This was early spring, where you see the primrose. And I forget what these little yellow guys are.
Little yellow guy.
Little yellow guys, that's the official name. So, really neat. Okay, slide. So people began to notice, I think some of you guys might be in this picture. Do you recognize anyone? Landmine. Land's like in all of our pictures.
I think that was a Wildlife Workshop tour.
Yeah, okay. So that's Michael Fell's in the back. I recognize that. At the time, you can tell when you are. Okay, slide. So the public began to take notice, but other people, entities began to take notice as well. So Texas Parks and Wildlife caught wind of this, and they came out and they became interested in it. And I never saw the episode, but I believe there's a short segment on their PBS show about prairies, and we might have like a frame or two of that, 2 minutes. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was next to become interested in this. They are here in force in Houston with their Urban Wildlife Partnership. See, I can't ever get it right. Urban Wildlife Refuge Partnership Program, and the focus of that program is on pollinator habitats such as prairies, and also connecting with underserved youth in surrounding communities. So they blend the two together, the programs that are nature interventions, the same way that we improve quality of life for patients at MD Anderson. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service is doing that with underserved youth in the prairies. They're also giving them career paths and options that they never would have been exposed to before, conservation, environmental science. And at the same time, they're creating habitat for pollinators. So I think it's a wonderful program. Slide. So by this time, we're swimming in our success here with our pilot project, and we had prairie fever. So we started out with 2 acres. All of those little prairie cells added up to 2 acres, and we ended up converting up to, I think at one time, 8 additional acres into prairies. Now, so here's an example. This was a large area of old world bluestem, highly invasive grass. We did use a herbicide to kill it. Okay? I don't have a better alternative to do that over large areas at this point. So we worked with Texas Parks and Wildlife, Wildlife Habitat Federation, the Prairie Conservancy, Prairie Conservancy came up with the process, and this is how we started to get rid of that old world loose stick. Slide. This is what we got out of it. It was great. We saw, when we did this, we saw something else that we have never seen out there before. Who knows the answer to this? Wetland people, that's right, people. They came out on the weekends, on the weekdays, taking pictures, just like it was. These were blue bonnets in the hill country. It was really neat. And his first year was the greatest flush I had ever seen in my life. So going to the next slide there. It was so bright, it was just so fantastic to look at. I make jokes that we needed sunglasses to go out there and look at the flowers, but it was absolutely stunning. And let's see the next slide.
What side is this?
This is on our south campus. South campus. So remember from one of those opening slides, MD Anderson has 254 acres in the Houston area. Most of that is right here in the medical center, and it's kind of fragmented. You might wander off into another area and be on campus and not realize it. So that's our south campus. That's south of OST. It's mostly research facilities out there. We also share buildings with UT Health Science. The dental school is out there. I think UT, there's some UT housing and the rec center is out there. If you're familiar with that section of town. So we're creating all these prairies and converting turf grass into prairies. We're avoiding the cost of mowing. We're having this economic benefit. We're bringing people out of the woodwork to look at the flowers and the succession of plants that are growing. And we wanted to make sure that we had a consistent message about why, and then we wanted to share the benefits of the urban prairie. And this section really began as an argument or kind of a defense of our own actions with our leadership, because they were asking questions. Slide. So the first benefit that we talk about is reduced impact maintenance. Okay, so I've shared that already. For every square foot of prairie turf grass you plant, that's one less square foot. For every square foot of prairie you plant, that's one less square foot of turf grass that you have to mow or pay somebody to mow. So you pay a lot of money for landscaping in this medical center. So that's the number one, most immediate benefit is cost avoidance. Slide. Okay. So this is a very important benefit. So the group that I operated in site operations, we were responsible for stormwater quality as well. And when we began this process, we didn't really understand the benefits of prairies and native grasses on stormwater filtration and improving water quality. But when I learned about it, it was like a whole other light bulb went off. And this slide right here has actually led to a lot of other programs that I'm going to share with you a little bit here. But long story short, you see the inverse relationship between infiltration and runoff from an impervious surface like concrete. You see all that run is zero infiltration, 100% runoff, and it's full of sludge. It's dark green. It's called a hydrocarbons. But look at the prairie grass. You have zero runoff. You have a lot of infiltration. Not all of it infiltrates. The rest of that water is held in the surface area of the leaves and the root system. But look at the color of the infiltrated water versus the runoff from the roadway. It's a lot cleaner, a lot clearer. Slide. Native plant propagation. This became one of our battle cries. Again, the Deer Park Prairie was not safe at the time, and we had gone out there and looked around and saw all these alien plants that I have never seen before. This is another one, Renninger yuccifolium, rattlesnake master. Strangest thing I've ever seen. This is my favorite plant now, by the way, so I love this thing. So that became part of the argument. Slide. Okay, so I'm going to go off on a little tangent real quick and talk to you about why we want native plants. This is just one of many arguments, but as we lose our remaining green spaces to development, it's up to us to save nature, save these native plants by propagating them ourselves. And Douglas Tallamy taught us that the survival of plant and wildlife species depends on this. Slide. So here's our rattlesnake master again with a bee on there. I don't know if that's a native or a honeybee. What do you guys think? Not a bee, native bee. Yeah, just a little different. Okay. So I learned that this plant supports up to 200 species of invertebrates. Fascinating. How many species does your Japanese ligustrum or azalea, whatever, at home support? maybe one or two pests, but 200 species of insects and invertebrates are dependent on this plant right here. Slide. So what's this? It's a chickadee. What do chickadees eat? Chickadees eat, right? Well, 95% of North American terrestrial songbirds, when they're breeding and trying to fledge their chicks from the nest, they don't want birdseed, they want protein. And where does the protein come from? It comes from the larvae of all these insects. Where does that come from? Well, these little birds are going to find the larvae on the native plants. They've co-evolved with for thousands, if not, I don't know how many thousands, tens of thousands of years. So, if those native plants are not there to provide a food source for the insects, these little guys have to work twice as hard, fly twice as fast, and end up in stressed, isolated populations that lead to extinction, localized extinction. And those localized areas of extinction coalesce, and then one day, silent spring. No native plants, no birds, bugs, right? So the question is, you guys know the answer because we're all Douglas Talbot fans. How many insect larvae, like caterpillars, does this little chickadee need to fledge its clutch from the nest? Now, keep in mind how small a chickadee is. It might weigh as much as 2 pennies, 3 pennies. A chick is going to be even lighter. So, how many caterpillars does this little guy need? More than 2. Let's see what the answer is. 6,000 to 10,000 caterpillars to fledge a single clutch. Chickadees, these things are tiny. How many caterpillars does it take for a larger bird? Like like mockingbird or robin, or I'm not a birder, so I don't know all the birds. But to me, that was fascinating. Also, it was an alarm went off. I thought, wow, it's very important to have these native plants in these prairies. And so, not only did this help us with our prairie argument, it helped us look at the rest of our campus and start to replace plantings with native plants at every opportunity. Next slide. Okay, so here's another benefit, wildlife habitat restoration. I actually call it urban wildlife refuge now, taking the lead from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. So, here you see some of our wildlife. It's not a lion or tiger or bear, most of our wildlife are invertebrates, creepy crawlies. Slide. We have a few mammals out there, a couple rodents, I think, and that's not much different from a rodent, is it? They're cuter. But lots of invertebrates, even in the wintertime. This is, I forgot what plant that is. It might be the goldenrod, but it's a dragonfly in the middle of the winter. It's just hanging out there, not moving very fast. Okay, next slide. And there's more. It just keeps on going. There's I think that's Pinterest right there. But there's a Pinterest. Does that look familiar to anyone? Or maybe it's iNaturalist. But I think it's iNaturalist. There's a page out there on one of those two. That's Pinterest.
Right there on the screen,
Okay.
yes, whether or not you have an
Okay. So I know there's an iNaturalist in the Anderson project out there. I haven't really looked at it much, but this is Pinterest. And this is from the Prairie Conservancy. They just started collecting observed insects. There's quite a bit. There's quite a bit of diversity out there. It's fascinating. Some of these things are really beautiful. Where did they come from? We didn't order them on Amazon. They just showed up because of the prairie. It's really beautiful. So the prairie brought an explosion of life. Slide. And so I like to share this. Wildlife diversity is an indicator of a healthy ecosystem. Healthy ecosystems are safe for people. That means we're not using, that's a good indicator that we're not using these endocrine disrupting chemicals, fertilizers, pesticides, fungicides. So you can see how we're starting to tie back ecosystem health with our own health. Okay? This is neat from a hospital perspective. Viewing wildlife is linked to increased compassion and improved relationships. That's one of the facts from, or one of the results of studies similar to what Dr. Ulrich did with the post-operative recovery. Slide. Wildlife exists underground too. We consider our microbes, our soil biology, our nematodes, microarthropods. We consider that wildlife as well. It's the basis of the food chain. So when you're using these toxic chemicals, fungicides especially, you're zapping that, you're resetting the button, starting succession all over again, really damaging your soil, healthy soil, healthy plants, and people too. There's a lot of research about gut biomes and how, right out of MD Anderson as a matter of fact, how your gut biome, which is often inoculated through soil contact, can and does serve as your first wave of immunity against diseases. Like educational venue. Prairies are also educational venues. It's another benefit. If you guys build a prairie and you're not using it for education, you have a weed patch. You have a weed patch. And that's how people are going to interpret it, unless you get out in front of them and talk about it. So this is a group of facilities, people, and there's some doctors. You guys know Christine Mansfield? That's Dr. Mansfield right there. Father. Okay, slide. And we had we needed coaching on this because we didn't really know how to connect with people on the prairie. So Jaime and Christine with the Cape Prairie Conservancy came out and taught us how to do that. So here we have staff throwing seed balls. So if you guys do your own prairie, this is what you do. Make seed balls and you get people to throw them. And, it really is great. It breaks down barriers. All of a sudden people are talking to each other and shaking hands and laughing, and it's just a lot of fun. It's a great way to create ownership too. All of a sudden, that's my prairie. I planted, I threw some seed balls out there. That's mine. Slide. And interpretive signage. That's another way to have the educational component when you're not there. If you don't have the sign in your sustainable landscape projects, prairies, whatever it is, then you're missing an opportunity, because the sign does what you can't do, or the sign does what you do when you're not there, even when you're sleeping. Okay? Slide. Research and observation. This is an unintended benefit of the prairie, but it really opened the doors for community collaboration. Kelly has done a lot of stuff out there, and other researchers. They've looked at everything from insect diversity, native bee diversity, rodents. There are people looking at soil biology, comparing the bacteria in a restored site to other prairie restorations around the city. So some interesting facts that we learned. At this time, the prairie had been established for about 2 years, but already we had 30 species of orthopterans. These are crickets, canids, and grasshoppers. Okay. There were 37 species of native bees observed, and that's fascinating. That's a huge number, and they just, again, where do they come from? We don't know. You build it and they will come. What that does tell me about the native bees, a lot of these, I learned from Danielle Below, who moved, unfortunately. She's in Denver now, but she did a lot of work on native bees and trying to work with public works departments in the city to incorporate native bee habitats into parking lots, because she learned that native bees have a limited flight radius. There's small, medium, large bees. Each bee has a certain radius, right? And if they don't have a connecting prairie patch or food source, well, they can't ever leave their little bubble, and then they'll eventually die, because that little bubble, whatever pollinating plant or whatever food source they have there, will eventually go away somehow. So what this tells me, let me go back up. So her work was to overlay the flight paths of native bees centered on prairie patches and try to create connectivity so that they could fly and migrate across the city and have that diversity that we're missing. So what this tells me, by having our native bees show up, is that somewhere nearby we have suitable habitat. We're providing an extra layer of connectivity. Slide. I just thought of that. Okay, restorative destination, number 7. We've talked about this. Nature is a restorative place. Whether you're here in the middle of a state park or in the Anderson, looking at it from your hotel room, your hospital room. So some of the rooms are very hotel-like. It's part of the environmental psychology. We know already, interacting with nature, simply observing it reduces stress, tension, and anxiety. It provides a positive distraction from the burdens of care and treatment, whether you're at St. Luke's or Methodist or MD Anderson. It also encourages physical activity. It's very important from a public health perspective. So, in MD Anderson, patients are highly mobile. They take their IV poles and they'll wander around in the evenings, walking is great. Slide. Okay, so I told you that the Prairie kind of created its own momentum and spurred a lot of other good things. So I'm going to talk about some of those. Slide. All right, so we talked about prairies, how they're not flat, right? They have these depressions, okay, called potholes. So we wondered, what if we recreated 2 potholes out of our prairie? So this one, and kind of doodled a little sketch there, and started talking about it. And next slide. And found a location. So this is in the winter time after we mow. We mow 1 time a year versus 43 times a year. Okay. Now you will recall that this used to be a parking lot for the HMB building. So we left the storm drains there. We didn't bother removing them. And that storm drain now is part of our pothole system. So we decided to put a pothole on each side of the storm drain, and they would overflow into the storm drain. Okay, slide. So there we go. Started to mark it out and excavate. We dug 12 inches of beautiful soil out, put a liner down, and then put the soil back. It was really that simple. We had to make sure that it was level and hold water, but we decided to use a liner because we wanted to retain the water as long as possible once we had it built up. Otherwise, they would evaporate just like that, being shallow as they are. Next slide. Okay, so there you go. As we're kind of testing it out there to see if everything works. You see the storm drain in the middle of the yellow flag, so they overflow. In fact, this one on the bottom of the slide, you can see it overflowing on the top there. Okay, slide. Even before we had plants out there, just by having water, we had signs of wildlife activity. It's really cool. So that's probably a great egret on the left, and that, I don't know, does that look like a possum or a raccoon maybe? Something. Mountain lion. Slide. And there you go. That's shortly after filling it up 1 time, planting. The plants came from a roadside ditch behind our office. We learned to identify wetland species, went out there. We did have a couple donated to us. Land came out and brought a bunch as well. And next slide. There's just a different angle. So there's 2 of them. We brought Gambusia mosquito eating fish in there to control mosquito populations. And what else? Slide. Little observation platform. Okay. Now, they're starting to disappear. You can't hardly see them in this slide unless you go up to that observation platform. Here's a little more mature picture. This is last fall, I believe. I can see the goldenrod blooming. I mean, that, to me, that's beautiful. I know beauty is in the eye of the beholder, but that's really neat. And it's so great to see a patient wandering around, having no idea what's out there, and then all of a sudden, oh, looking at this pothole. Whether they like it or not, it's a positive distraction from what's going on in the hospital. That's all we want. Next slide. There's another picture there. It's really neat to see how these things integrate and blend and just kind of melt away into the surrounding landscape. Next slide. There's a different angle. So what do you see there? A sign. You gotta have a sign. Otherwise, that's just a mosquito breeding habitat. Next slide. But our sign tells a different story. Okay. I know you guys can't read that. That's okay. Next slide. Stormwater wetlands. So the next evolution of the prairie was to build stormwater wetlands. So the prairie potholes are kind of a passive wetland system. They belong in the prairie, but a true prairie, you have a source where the water comes in, an inflow. We have an outflow where the water leaves and enters into the watershed. The theory is that moving the water through all the organic matter in the plants will improve the water quality by the time it leaves the system. Okay? But look down there in the lower right, caring for our environment. MD Anderson is committed to sound environmental stewardship and this stormwater wetland is part of a wider initiative to provide healthy, sustainable green spaces, not only for the environment, but for our patients, visitors, and staff. Does that sound familiar? That's the why behind why we do these things that I talked about, that I spent so much time on in the beginning, because it's very fundamental. It really drives what we do at Anderson. Next slide. Okay, so here's what a stormwater wetland looks like. We first have to start with a detention pond. So this could be a detention pond at your community center, at a church. If you want to go large scale and pick out a neighborhood detention pond that's 5 or 6 acres, there's a great opportunity there. We started small. Okay. So next slide. We had to. Can you back up slides? Okay, so the inflow and the outflow have to be on opposite ends of the system. So the next slide. We had to move one, so we moved it. Next slide. So now in the background you see, in the foreground this is where the water comes in, and it flows kind of in a circle, and it does a 180, and it goes back out at the far end. Slide. Here we go. That's the exit. So now you see that this detention pond has been kind of carved and sculpted a little bit. Next slide. We put a weir there. It's a dam. Okay, so that dam holds water in temporarily. A detention pond its purpose is to hold water, it's to hold runoff temporarily, while instead of inundating our waterways with flood water, it's to hold water temporarily, just let the creeks go down before releasing this. So the weir holds the water a little bit longer, otherwise that would just flow right out, and it gives us different depths that were used level, laser level, and did some hand grading, and then we planted it. So it's not very beautiful in that picture, but next slide. It doesn't take long for this stuff to really take off. And to me, that is absolutely stunning. This was just a silly detention pond on the side of a building, and now it's a beautiful place that people are interested in. These are native plants. There are prairie grasses in here. There's switchgrass and blue stem grass in here. This is nothing more than a giant prairie pothole functioning the way that they should. Okay? And we are very happy with this project. We do try to manage its aesthetics a little bit by thinning some of the plants that become invasive. There's some ornamental plants on the margins. Next slide. There's another shot there. Next slide. There's the weir functioning. So you see how the water kind of flows over. Next slide. Dahlia, the broadleaf plant that looks a bit ginger. Next slide. This is exactly what we wanted to see. So we're creating a refuge for native plants, a refuge for urban wildlife. It's a place where people want to go. There's other benefits. We're avoiding the cost of mowing in that grass-lined detention pond. We're improving stormwater quality. As the water leaves that site, it's in better condition than when it entered. And these are just such great projects. It's a win-win for people and nature. Next slide. And this is just 2 weeks ago. Back in, actually, I didn't take this picture. I just grabbed it. Mary Carol Edwards took this picture. She is a program coordinator with the Texas Coastal Watershed Program. So if you guys have a project like this that you want to get started or need some help with, that's where you go. The Texas Coastal Watershed Program. It's actually part of Texas AgriLife Extension Service, and they do have funding to help get your projects going. They were able to give us $15,000, if I recall correctly, for 2 stormwater wetlands. So there was a second one. Unfortunately, it was no sooner than we built it. It was reclaimed for mobile MRI units, and due to a relatively high priority project. So it went away. But next slide. Doing it again. So this is what it looks like when it's just starting. So this is also on South Campus. We lost an acre or more of prairie to a new parking lot. Anytime you have an impervious surface, building addition like a parking lot in Houston, you have to have a stormwater. You have to have either a detention pond to manage that stormwater or some other measure. I don't know all the rules behind it. We want stormwater wetlands, so we're gonna opt for the surface detention pond like this. And in time, if you can go back one more slide, it will look like this. So, that hole was dug just before I left. And I'm confident I've left good people in charge of that, project. I saw a question.
How old is that project? Not this one.
Previous one?
Yes.
That's about 2 years. Okay. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, so this is the wetland why. We've been talking about this. It really is synonymous with prairies, because wetlands and prairies go together. They advance sustainability initiatives for our institution and for you. It connects people to nature. We are increasing the biodiversity of plants and animals, conserving water, reducing maintenance, and from an institutional perspective, it provides positive PR. A lot of times people ask, well, how can I get my leaders or my neighborhood association to do this? Well, sell them on the marketing benefits. Everyone wants to support the environment, but people don't really know how. They don't know ways that make sense. You've got to appeal to a broad spectrum of interests, political, alignment. People can get behind health benefits of nature. They can get behind economic benefits of nature. Environmental benefits might be a tougher sell depending on who you're talking to. But there's something in it for everyone. Next slide. Okay, so the future of nature at MD Anderson looks good. We've got these programs built. We've got we've changed the landscape over there. We have new sustainability initiatives like stormwater wetlands. We understand what a restorative hospital garden looks like. So before I left, I made sure that I captured all of this, the 7 years of my work there, and wrote as much as possible into our owner design guidelines, so that next time there's a new building and those architects and engineers get those plans or the initial specifications, the guidelines that tell you what to do with the site. Well, they're going to see patient care gardens with all of these restorative characteristics. They're going to see stormwater wetlands in lieu of detention ponds. They're going to see native plants. They're going to see native ecosystems. We're hoping that we can get at least, for every new site that we have, we're hoping to get at least some sort of native ecosystem restored on there, whether it's Pocket Prairie, the Gulf Coast, if it's up in the Woodlands or Kingwood, north, the East Piney Woods, that we'll see a reforestation project on the site. So that's hopefully the legacy that I've left. Fingers crossed. Next slide. And I'll kind of end it with this. This is Flo Hannah's grandson getting lost in the prairie. It's great. It's a good age to be, and you can only wonder what he's thinking as he goes down that little trail. There's imagination's probably running wild. But this kind of sums up why we do what we do. Questions?
Is the owner design guidelines only for MD Anderson, or does it apply to any buildings?
Just MD Anderson. Land.
So who is there now, and is that person going to continue the stormwater wetlands and the prairies and things like that until they build a building over there?
Yes, so I came from a very small work unit. There's just a handful of us, very close, and we are all in alignment. So my former boss is the chief engineer. We have a wonderful new person, Iris Clausen Davis, who has assumed a lot of my responsibilities. She's coming to us from the Dallas Arboretum. She's got a lot of background in this as well. She's a horticulturist in addition. So she is full steam ahead. Some of you know my colleague Alan Wolf, same thing, full steam ahead. So we have the people and resources at MD Anderson to make this, to keep this alive. Question in the back?
Well, I think Lon knows what I know, and that is, we thought the prairie was temporary because
good question. So I showed a rendering slide. That's from our long-term capital plan that showed 4 buildings. So the 2 buildings in the bottom of the picture sit on the prairie. This one specifically is right in the middle of the prairie. And, you know, we knew this going into it, and that's okay. We're gonna continue with prairies elsewhere on campus, and there will be prairie grasses integrated into this. One of the outcomes of doing this is, in working these into the owner design guidelines, is that we integrate nature into the fabric of New Anderson, not just with patient care, and employee health and wellness, but facilities design, going back all the way to the beginning with Dr. Roger Ulrich, who was the pioneer of evidence-based design for healthcare settings. He looked at how the environment influenced outcomes, clinical outcomes, but he also worked on actual hospital design, everything from OR room or surgical room ergonomics to what does the main lobby look like, making it look more like a hotel. Come to find out, Dr. Ulrich did in fact have some input on the original design of May's Clinic on the top of the slide, and the Duncan Cancer Prevention Building on the right-hand side. So these other 2 buildings will continue that design theme. So that was a great bit of news that I learned recently, that he had some influence on this. But we intend to preserve as much as we can these new buildings. Okay. Question?
Are we gonna surreptitiously put in some native plants back there in the Pothole garden, despite their plans not to or whatever?
So I don't have as much latitude with garden design out here because we have people directly responsible for that. We also have a master plan that we have to honor and respect. So there are going to be little ecological wins here and there. I can tell you that the garden staff out here does a wonderful job at avoiding chemicals and pesticides. It's 100% organic, far more organic and biological based than I practice in New Anderson. I practice what I call true horticulture out here.
I mean, do they have, okay, can you sneak some native plants in or not?
So
Okay, do you decide, can you, be part of the decision making on what plants they put in?
we can. There's a process. We would run through the process and make collaborative decisions. Now, outside of the McGovern Gardens, in the Herman Park proper, there are prairie restoration sites. There's the Whistletop Prairie. There's a small prairie on underneath the post oak savannas on Almeda. It's not very visible. The Whistletop Prairie is visible. It's very nice. It's not as large as what we saw just now. And that is a pollinator habitat. That's an opportunity for native plants. We also have a lot of property along the bayou as well, shoring up the slopes with wildflowers, native grasses. That's on our radar as well. So, yes. Question?
This is kind of tangential, but before she left, did Danielle have any headway with the Houston City Council on the plans that move around the parking lot?
I'm not sure.